Have you ever walked away from a conversation with a woman feeling like something was missing?
As if the words she used were only half the message? You listened. You nodded. You responded. But deep down, you sensed that you missed the point entirely. Why does she say one thing, then do another? Why does she say, "I'm fine," when she clearly isn't? Why does she ask you to be honest, then react emotionally to your honesty? You might be tempted to call it manipulation, drama, emotional chaos. But what if it's none of that? What if it's something far more complex and far more human? A woman is like a poem. She does not exist to be solved, only experienced. Anonymous. We live in a world that teaches men to listen logically, to assume words are instructions, to treat communication like data, input, process, output. But women, not all, but many, speak a different language. Not just in words, but in tone, in timing, in silence. To understand her, you must first question what you think communication is. Most men are trained to listen for content, not context. If she says, "Go out with your friends," you assume she means exactly that. But later she's distant, withdrawn, or cold. You're confused. Didn't she say it was okay? Yes. But what she said and what she meant are not always aligned. Not because she's lying, but because her language isn't built for clarity. It's built for connection. Psychologists call this high-context communication. Meaning is derived not from the words alone, but from the surrounding emotional landscape. She may say, "Do what you want," but her tone, her body language, her energy, they're all part of the message. Are you listening to all of it? In many male-dominated communication styles, the goal is clarity, efficiency, precision. But for many women, the goal of speech is not to convey facts, it's to express an internal state. When she says, "You never listen to me," she may not mean it literally. She might mean, "I feel unheard in this moment. I feel alone." If you respond with, "That's not true, I listened yesterday," you've missed the entire point. You responded to the surface, not the soul. The great misunderstanding between men and women is not what is said, but what is felt. Carl Jung. She speaks in a language of emotion, and if you're only listening for logic, you'll always miss her. Another reason women don't always say what they mean, protection. Women are conditioned, socially and biologically, to avoid direct confrontation when it may risk connection or safety. Saying "I'm fine" instead of "I'm hurt" can be a defense mechanism. Not because she wants to lie, but because vulnerability is terrifying. How many times has she been punished for her honesty? How many times has truth been met with rejection? Sometimes, the safest thing she can do is to say what she thinks you can handle. If she doesn't believe you can hold her truth, she won't offer it. And if your ego gets bruised every time she speaks unfiltered pain, she will learn to filter. Today's world tells women to be strong and expressive, but still pleasing and non-threatening. So she lives in contradiction. Speak up, but not too loud. Be direct, but not rude. Express your needs, but don't appear needy. And when you're caught in that cultural contradiction long enough, your speech becomes cautious, strategic, sometimes unclear. Women are not inconsistent. They are navigating multiple, conflicting expectations at all times. Esther Perel. So yes, she might say one thing and mean another. Not to manipulate you, but to survive in a world that rarely makes room for her full voice. You heard her words, but did you hear her? Real listening requires more than ears. It requires presence, curiosity, the courage to read between the lines. When she says, "Do what you want," ask yourself, is she saying this out of fear, out of love, out of resignation? When she pulls away after saying she's fine, don't just take the words at face value. Ask her again, not aggressively, but with empathy. "You said you're fine. Are you sure? You seem distant, and I want to understand." That one moment of deeper listening can mean the difference between connection and collapse. To listen is to lean in softly, with a willingness to be changed by what we hear. Mark Nepo. What it means to truly understand a woman. To understand her, you must first be willing to set aside your need for certainty. She may contradict herself. She may change her mind. She may speak in metaphor, in mood, in implication. And it doesn't make her wrong. It makes her human. This is not a puzzle to be solved. It's a rhythm to be danced with, a current to be attuned to. True understanding means sitting in the discomfort of ambiguity. It means trusting the feeling behind the phrase. Why it matters? You might ask, why not just demand clarity? Because if you force her into your structure, she becomes smaller than she is. You don't connect with a woman by pinning her down. You connect by rising to her level of emotional fluency. A woman will reveal herself to the man who can hold the chaos of her truth without flinching. David Data. Understanding her is not about decoding every sentence. It's about recognizing that her language is living, evolving, rooted not in facts but in presence. And if you want to truly know her, you must meet her there. Not with solutions, but with space. Not with logic alone, but with listening that touches the heart. So ask yourself again, did you really understand her? Or did you just hear what was easy to hear? Do you believe that reason governs human nature? That we are logical beings making decisions based on facts, numbers, evidence? Then you're already lost. Because what if I told you that beneath all appearances of calm, behind the eyes of every human, and especially in the depth of the feminine soul, there is a force that cannot be explained, only felt. A force Schopenhauer called the will. Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Arthur Schopenhauer. The will is not your conscious desire. It is not your choice. It is your hunger to exist, to survive, to assert yourself. It moves through you whether you understand it or not. And in women, this will is profound, often misunderstood, and almost never spoken aloud. She is not driven by logic, but by will. You ask, why does she change her mind? You say, I don't understand what she wants. She might not either. And that's not a flaw. That is will. A woman doesn't sit down to write a blueprint for her behavior. She feels her way forward. She responds to her inner world, her emotional landscape, the pulse of her instincts. Not in rebellion against reason, but because something deeper governs her. A woman sees further with the heart than a man does with the eyes. That heart is not weak. It is a compass. It guides her away from danger, toward safety, toward life, toward love. And it does not owe you a rational explanation. She may say one thing and do another. Not because she's lying, but because the will has shifted. What was true yesterday is no longer true today. Her truth is momentary, fluid, alive. You want her to be a statue, but she is a flame. Schopenhauer believed the will to be nature's raw drive to continue, to propagate, to conquer death through creation. This is nowhere more evident than in the feminine. She was not built for comfort. She was built to endure, to protect the future through the present, to sense danger before it becomes visible, to test, to provoke, to adapt. What looks to you like indecisiveness is often a form of hyper-awareness. Is he safe? Is he strong? Can he lead me? Will he abandon me? 1,000 calculations made without words. Her smile is a test. Her silence is a signal. Her challenge is a filter. You may think she's playing games, but she's playing survival. And in that game, the will has no patience for your logic. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, but the most responsive to change. Charles Darwin. The masculine mistake, wanting stability from the unstable. You want her to be consistent, predictable, rational. But consistency is not the feminine virtue. Adaptability is. The world changes. The mood shifts. The energy flows. The woman adapts. She moves like water, like wind, like intuition. And that terrifies you, because you want to contain her in a system, to make her manageable. But the will cannot be managed. It can only be met with strength. The man who demands predictability from a woman is like a sailor who curses the ocean for being deep. It is not her role to be still. It is your role to become unshakable. The feminine will is not wicked, it is raw. You might believe she is manipulative, that she bends the truth, that she speaks in riddles. But have you ever asked yourself why? Because truth in her world is not static. It's emotional, contextual, alive. You demand clarity. She seeks resonance. That means her yes today can become no tomorrow. Because her will, her instincts, her safety have shifted. And here is the harsh truth. She does not exist to make you comfortable. She exists to express life in its most potent, primal form. Schopenhauer did not flatter women, but he respected their natural will because he saw it clearly, not as morality but as nature incarnate. Nature has not granted to woman a love of truth as a principle. Schopenhauer. To many, this sounds insulting. But what if it's not? What if it's liberation? Women were never meant to be statues of moral perfection. They were never designed to think like men. They were created to feel, to sense, to embody the pulse of life itself. What happens when you deny her will? When men try to moralize the feminine, to fit her into frameworks of consistency and submission, something terrible happens. She begins to fake. She begins to perform. She begins to say what she thinks you want to hear. And then you complain. Why aren't women honest? They were. until they learned it wasn't safe. They learned that speaking the truth of the will made them crazy. Too much, too intense. So they buried the will under politeness, under smiles, under soft words, and now you don't see her at all. You see a version that protects herself from you. But here's the question. Can you handle her actual truth? Can you handle the raw, emotional, sometimes contradictory will that pulses through her? Because if not, you don't want a woman. You want a mirror. Schopenhauer believed the will could never be tamed, only recognized. So stop trying to control her. Start trying to see her. See the fire behind her eyes. See the storm behind her silence. See the intuition behind her contradiction. Not to analyze it, but to hold it, without fear, without reaction. That is what the strong man does. He does not flinch when her emotions rise. He does not retreat when her will tests his. He grounds himself. He listens deeper. He leads without force. The will is the innermost essence of man and woman, and life is its manifestation. Schopenhauer, a woman in her will is not your enemy. She is not here to challenge you for power. She is here to challenge your presence, to test whether your masculinity is real or reactive, whether your leadership is rooted or superficial. And yes, she may pull away. She may push buttons. She may contradict herself. But it is not because she is wicked. It is because she is wild. And wildness is not chaos. Wildness is truth without filters. If you want her to be honest, you must stop punishing her for the truth. If you want her to be steady, you must first become still. If you want her to surrender, you must prove yourself worthy of trust. Her will not obey you, but it will reflect you. If she doesn't feel safe, she will become manipulative. If she doesn't feel seen, she will become chaotic. If she doesn't feel led, she will try to lead, then resent you for it. So stop asking her to be less, and start becoming more grounded, more aware, more capable of holding the storm without being destroyed by it. A woman's chaos is not an obstacle. It is an invitation, unknown. You do not need to understand the will fully. You only need to recognize its reality. She is not a problem to solve. She is a power to respect. That is what Schopenhauer saw, and that is what modern men must remember. Not to dominate her, not to suppress her, but to see her, to hold her, and finally to meet her, not with fear, but with presence, not with rules, but with reverence. And in doing so, you do not weaken yourself. You awaken yourself to life, to truth, to the will that lives in all of us, but speaks loudest through her. Have you ever asked yourself why words matter so much? Why a single sentence can change the course of history, break a heart, or start a war? It's not just about communication. It's about domination. Language is not neutral. Language is power. All language is a set of symbols whose use among its speakers assumes a shared past. Jorge Luis Borges. From birth, we are immersed in language, but rarely do we question its architecture. We speak because we were taught to. We think in words because those words were given to us. But who gave them? And for what purpose? The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." So, whose language are you living in? Language shapes perception. It decides what is visible and what is invisible, what is acceptable and what is taboo. When someone names the world for you, they are framing your reality. This is why totalitarian regimes rewrite dictionaries, why religious institutions create sacred texts, why political parties coin slogans. He who defines dominates. Words are not mirrors. They are weapons. A man who controls his words controls his reality. But a man whose language is programmed by others, he walks in chains he cannot see. The greatest prison people live in is the fear of what other people think. David Icke. But how is that fear created? With words. Words like selfish. Words like toxic. Words like should. Every culture has a vocabulary of shame. A set of linguistic handcuffs designed to bind you to obedience. Language doesn't just describe your reality. It prescribes it. Language and moral power. Nietzsche understood that morality is not universal. It's not divine. It's linguistic. He called it slave morality when the weak redefined their weakness as virtue. Words like humility, obedience, and meekness became moral ideals, not because they led to flourishing, but because they neutralized the strong. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Friedrich Nietzsche. But the deeper question is, who gave you your why? Language is the medium through which moral frameworks are installed. A child is told, good boys don't cry. A woman is told, nice girls don't speak up. These phrases are not facts. They are programs. The more you internalize them, the more you live according to someone else's script. You don't become moral. You become manageable. Language is not only a masculine tool of construction, it is also a feminine force of influence. While men often use words to define and delineate, women often use words to test and transform. Why? Because language is a social currency. It builds alliances, sets hierarchies, signals attraction, communicates approval or disapproval. In this realm, mastery of tone, implication, and subtlety is not weakness. It is power. Ask yourself, have you ever felt confused after a conversation with a woman? Not because she was unclear, but because she was speaking a different language? One of feeling, of emotional nuance, of context. You thought the words mattered, but she was listening to the energy. The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. Peter Drucker. Language, for her, is not just expression. It is intuition made audible. And that can unsettle you if you're only fluent in facts. To communicate with the feminine, you must learn not just to speak, but to listen between the lines. Language is psychological territory. Think of every word as a border. When you say, I am depressed, you are claiming identity through language. When you say, he is toxic, you are claiming moral authority through language. Words are spells. To label is to limit. To define is to dominate. And this is not inherently evil. It is simply how humans carve meaning out of chaos. But the problem begins when you forget that the map is not the territory, that the words are not the thing. If you define yourself as broken, guess what you become? If you define life as suffering, guess what you experience? Language is the software that runs your psychology. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Lao Tzu. Words are the bridge between the invisible and the visible. And whoever builds that bridge builds your reality. So the question is, who wrote your dictionary? To reclaim your power, you must first reclaim your language. You must identify the scripts you were given and rewrite them consciously. Not to please others, not to fit in, but to express truth. Truth that may be ugly, truth that may offend, truth that may liberate. Speak the truth, not to dominate others, but to stop being dominated by lies. When you say, no, you are reclaiming space. When you say, I don't agree, you are reclaiming thought. When you say, I choose, you are reclaiming agency. This is not semantics. This is sovereignty. To speak a language is to take on a world, a culture. Frantz Fanon. Choose your world. Choose your culture. Choose your words. Or someone else will. The weaponization of words. Modern culture weaponizes language subtly. It uses euphemism to numb pain. It uses labels to kill nuance. It uses buzzwords to end conversations. Think of terms like problematic, privilege, gaslighting. Often, these terms are used not to seek understanding but to assert dominance. To silence. The danger here is not in the words themselves. It's in the unthinking way they are wielded. Words should open minds, not close them. True communication requires vulnerability, patience, and the willingness to be wrong. But when language becomes ideology, dialogue dies. Language and identity. How do you describe yourself? I am an introvert. I am broken. I am not good enough. These are not just thoughts. They are contracts, signed by repetition, reinforced by belief. If you want to change your life, you must begin by changing your language. Do not speak what is untrue. Do not repeat what weakens you. Do not label yourself in ways that strip your power. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not your programming. You are the author of your speech, and therefore of your story. Even love is shaped by language. How we say I love you, how we apologize, how we express needs. Many relationships fail not from lack of feeling, but from lack of verbal skill. Men who cannot articulate their inner world become prisoners of silence. Women who cannot trust their partner's word become critics instead of lovers. Words build or break intimacy. Learning to speak truth with care and strength is not optional. It is foundational. You cannot lead without language. You cannot connect without language. You cannot heal without language. Words are, in my not-so-humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic. Albus Dumbledore, J.K. Rowling. Schopenhauer said, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." But perhaps that is only half true, because if you change your language, you can change your will. You can begin to see differently, to feel differently, to move differently, not through force, but through words. Words that speak life. Words that name reality. Words that slice through illusion like swords. The mouth is not just for eating or kissing. It is a weapon, a wand, a prayer. So speak. Speak with intention. Speak with courage. Speak with clarity. And above all, speak with power. Your voice is not small. It is sacred. Use it to free yourself. And you just might free others too. Why do people lie? Why do we bend the truth, hide our intentions, or mask our emotions? Is it always malicious? Is it always weak? Or is it something deeper? Man is not what he thinks he is what he hides. Andre Malraux. We often think of dishonesty as a moral failure, a flaw of character, a betrayal, and sometimes it is. But dishonesty is also survival. It is strategy. It is defense. It is the instinctive armor of a person who has been hurt, judged, or misunderstood one too many times. From an early age, we learn to play roles. The good student, the obedient child, the likable friend. Each role demands a mask, and behind each mask, a truth is silenced. A boy learns not to cry because tears are weak. A girl learns not to speak up because anger is unladylike. So we become experts in emotional censorship, in social camouflage, not because we are false, but because we are afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of punishment, afraid of being too much or not enough. This is not deception, it is protection. We are so accustomed to disguise ourselves to others that in the end we become disguised to ourselves. François de La Rochefoucauld. Modern life rewards diplomacy, not directness. Smooth talkers climb higher than truth tellers. Charm matters more than clarity. Have you ever watched someone succeed by saying what people want to hear? Have you ever seen someone punished for saying what others fear to face? We live in a world where honesty is a liability, where truth is inconvenient. So we learn to adapt. We smile when we want to scream. We agree when we want to rebel. We say, "I'm fine," when we're breaking. This dishonesty is not random. It's systemic. It's built into business. It's built into dating. It's built into friendship. To function, we often must lie. The real question isn't, do you lie? The real question is, when do you feel safe enough to stop? This question of safety is especially relevant when speaking about women. Have you ever heard a woman say, "I'm not looking for anything serious," only to later want depth and commitment? Have you ever been told, "Everything's fine," when everything clearly wasn't? Was it dishonesty? Or was it fear? Women have, for centuries, learned that expressing certain truths is dangerous. Truths about desire, truths about anger, truths about dissatisfaction. These expressions have historically led to violence, shame, exclusion, or ridicule. So what develops instead? Tactics, deflection, politeness, ambiguity. This is not manipulation in the traditional sense. It is adaptation to a world that often punishes female directness. When a woman says nothing's wrong, everything is wrong. And when a woman says everything's wrong, everything is wrong. Anonymous. Is this fair? No, but it's real. And if we want to understand dishonesty, we must first understand the environment that makes it necessary. Men are also conditioned to wear masks, but of a different kind. The mask of control, the mask of logic, the mask of confidence. Men are taught to avoid vulnerability, to suppress uncertainty, to never appear weak. So what happens when a man feels lost, or insecure, or broken? He hides, not just from others, but from himself. He rationalizes emotions. He overcompensates with achievement. He pretends not to care, and this dishonesty becomes internalized. A man who cannot tell the truth to himself will struggle to be real with others. This is not because he lacks integrity. It's because he lacks permission. All dishonesty has a cost. Not just the risk of being caught, but the risk of forgetting who you are beneath the act. When we lie to avoid conflict, we lose our voice. When we lie to be liked, we lose our self-respect. When we lie to survive, we lose the freedom to live fully. Psychologist Carl Jung believed that what you repress doesn't disappear. It festers. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Dishonesty creates a split self, one that performs, and one that suffers. Over time, the suffering grows. Anxiety, resentment, depression, not because you're broken, but because your truth has no home. Radical honesty as a path to freedom. So what is the alternative? It is not brutal honesty. It is not tactless confession. It is radical honesty. The courage to speak your truth without attachment to approval. the grace to listen to others' truths without defensiveness. This does not mean sharing everything. It means not hiding what matters. It means saying, I'm not okay when you're not. It means saying, I need without shame. It means saying, I disagree with love. Honesty does not destroy connection. It deepens it, but only when the environment is safe enough to hold it. So the work begins with you. The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. James A. Garfield. Can you be the kind of person with whom others can be honest? Can you hold space for their truth, even when it hurts? And most importantly, can you do this for yourself? One of the fears people have about honesty is that it will cause harm. And yes, words can wound, but silence can strangle. There is a way to speak truth without cruelty, to be clear without being cold, to be real without being reckless. This is emotional maturity. This is conscious communication. It takes practice. It takes humility. But it is possible. Honesty is not the enemy of kindness. Dishonesty is. The deepest lie, perhaps the most dangerous lie, is not what we tell others, but what we tell ourselves. I'm fine. I don't care. This is just the way it is. These are not truths. They are shields, and they block not just pain, but joy. Not just conflict, but connection. To live fully is to risk truth. To love deeply is to welcome discomfort. To grow is to strip away what is false. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you odd. Flannery O'Connor. Yes, honesty may cost you something, but dishonesty will cost you everything. It will cost you intimacy. It will cost you self-respect. It will cost you your own voice. Ask yourself, where am I not being honest? Who do I pretend to be? What am I afraid will happen if I tell the truth? And then ask yourself, what might happen if I don't? Dishonesty may protect you from pain, but it also protects you from healing. To become whole, you must be seen. And to be seen, you must be known. Not the edited version, not the version that pleases. The real you, the vulnerable you, the you beneath the mask. Be yourself, everyone else is already taken. Oscar Wilde. You don't owe the world perfection. You owe it honesty, not just for them, but for you. Because the moment you stop hiding, you start living.